Switched on IT is proudly brought to you by Oz Hosting, Cloud Made Easy.
Welcome to Switched on IT. I'm Barry. This is the show where we talk about everything IT. I wonder how many of you out there actually look at your data to see what's happening with your marketing. Today on Google and many other of the programs that you can get out there, you can see all kinds of really interesting data that tell you things like how many viewers you've got, where they're from, what times of the day your viewers are online watching you, what things they're responding to. You can look at data across all kinds of things, and you'll hear lots of people say that data is king in order to make sure that you are tracking what's actually happening with your with the people that are looking at your site and what they're doing, what they like to look at, and so on. You really need to be tracking your data. So today, Doug and Ray, who are with us now, are going to talk to us about data-driven information and how you use that to track what's happening. Gentlemen, welcome to Switched on IT. How are you both today?
Pretty well, Barry.
Doing well.
Good. Ray, let's just begin by talking to you about data. Data, I suspect that lots of people set up their websites and e-commerce stores and what have you, but either don't have the time or the inclination or perhaps the knowledge to be able to look at and use the data that's being generated for them in order to know what's really going on with their site. Is that a fair comment?
I think it's probably fair. I think what we need to recognize is that not making the time, it's not finding time, it's making the time to understand data for data-driven business decisions today is as good as deciding to not thrive as a small business owner. Today, we have the capabilities to track that data. We have the capabilities to be able to understand the data. Just a simple couple of hours watching statistics courses on Khan Academy for free, and you'll have the basic understanding of what you need to in order to be able to read the analytics reports and other kinds of statistical reports that are provided to you in all of the tools that we'll be talking about today. I think the biggest misnomer is that we're only worried about your website, that we're only worried about the number of people who are coming to your website and ultimately what they're doing on the site. And there's actually quite a panoply of different types of metrics we should all be paying attention to. And so what I thought Doug and I would do today is to kind of cover what are the various analytics that are out there, and I'll explain some of them to you so that you can understand maybe what some of those are. Then we'll talk about some of the tools that you can use. It's not just one tool to track websites. It's actually quite a number of tools that you have to use to be able to get a full picture. And then ultimately, what's good data? What are good data? And understanding how to read that data for making good business decisions. And so that's what we're going to do today.
Okay. I'll jump in there, Barry, if that's okay. So I think we can obviously divide this up into various types of sort of digital or online marketing activities that we're going to understand what sort of data might be generated, what sort of measurements we might be interested in evaluating. So I think maybe the best way to start is to say, well, what are the different types of activities? So we can look at email, we can look at the website itself, the analytical tools that are available to evaluate what's happening there. Potentially we've got online advertising activity running as well, so tracking online ads. And then finally, of course, we wouldn't be in an online world without understanding what's happening in our social media activities. So we'll step through all of those. We'll look at the tools at the end of that. And Ray, maybe we can start with email marketing. And I was talking to a small business owner just this week who was asking me about how fast he would be able to send emails and any difficulties or impediments that I might see in with him using his Microsoft 365 business email account to send emails to what he told me was probably 5,000 to 10,000 email recipients. Firstly, before we sort of step into the analytical tools, is that a very good idea, just to use your regular business email account for doing email marketing campaigns?
You're lobbing that one to me. Absolutely not. The email infrastructure that is in place for you to be able to send those kinds of relays are not designed for email marketing. You do need substantive and separate email marketing software, not only for regulatory affairs, but for also the infrastructure to be able to send that many email. I mean, you're talking, maxing out at probably 200 to 300 emails per day, from a normal, email account is normative for a system before they block you from sending email of that kind of volume.
Absolutely. And you're right. There's also things like the Spam Act, and you've got to have a very robust process to be able to record unsubscribe requests and hopefully automate that process. It was definitely not a smart idea for this guy to do that. Although I suspect that he may have decided to find out the hard way. But anyway, you can only have those.
Oh dear.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
he's going to have trouble in the EU with GDPR. He's going to have all kinds of problems.
yeah. That was anyway. They live in hope. So having selected an email marketing platform and sent out an email campaign, what are the sort of key measures that we should be looking for to help us gauge our success, and what are the warning signs?
Yeah, so one of the first things that I actually talk to folks about is actually their unsubscribe rate. We want to actually decide upfront what they want their unsubscribe rate to be. And you might find that to be counterintuitive, and it's meant to be, because you have to think about the other side. You have to think about churn. If you don't have people unsubscribing from your email list, then you don't have a vibrant email list. You're not using your email list if people aren't unsubscribing. And so email churn, as we call it in email marketing, needs to be something that you consider almost right up front. How many people do you think are going to leave your list on a regular basis? Which means then, what is your subscription rate? How many people are you going to be able to add to your email to keep up with, to keep pace with the number of people who are leaving you? And that's because over time, people have preferences. They no longer need your services. They no longer have interest in buying from you. They realize that they're not the ideal customer, and that's actually really good. You want to weed out the chaff from the wheat, and you want to be able to keep giving nutrients to the wheat so that it becomes the thing that turns into real dollars and cents in your bank accounts. And so if you don't have an understanding of your unsubscribe rates, you're going to really have trouble making success out of your email marketing. Also, if you start to see unsubscribe rates that really skyrocket above what you normally would consider, you said, okay, well, I think we're going to have maybe a 2%, 4% unsubscribe rate month over month, and all of a sudden you see 8 and 10. Well, that's a good indicator that you're doing something wrong. Perhaps there's something that is happening on the server. Perhaps there's something happening in your DNS. How you set up your records. There could be any number of things, but that's a good highlight for you to be able to say there's something wrong. So you should know how to be able know how to diagnose problems by looking at that unsubscribe rate, because it is probably the most accurate thing for me in terms of being able to understand what's going on here. Why are we getting so many of those? The next, of course, is bounce rate. Bounce rate will really tell you if you're getting quite a number of problems in the system from an email deliverability perspective to a number of other reasons for things happening. But if you're getting a lot of unsubscribes, it's likely because something's happening and those people feel like they're getting spammed or other kinds of things are happening and they're unsubscribing in larger doses. It could just be bad content. And we all have to be mindful of the fact that sometimes we just have content that's not living up to the standards of the people that we're serving, and we need to elevate that content. So there's unsubscribe rate, There's bounce rate for just identifying how many emails get delivered versus how many are soft or hard bouncing. Soft bounce means that the account is there and active, but it's for some reason rejecting the email because it may be full, it may not be capable of accepting email at this moment. And then, of course, hard bouncing means that the email account no longer exists, and for some reason, you're emailing an account that doesn't exist. Then we start talking about the kind of more fine-tuned marketing components there. First one up is click-through rate. Click-through rate means that when I open up the email, do I click on links in the email that take me out of the email and into some kind of web presence? And that could be a landing page, it could be a lead page, it could be a blog, it could be a website of some other kind, and or a tool. But what is the click-through rate? We want some level of understanding that when we ask people to do something, that they're going to do it. And typically that's the click-through rate. If it's not the click-through rate, then it's conversion rate. And conversion rate is, of course, what we ask people to do. Are they doing what we want them to do? And if that's clicking through and going to some place and then doing something, then we need to identify that goal. And the number of people who reach that goal are converted folks, right? Those are the people who have converted. We want to also pay attention to list growth. That is over time. That's netting out your unsubscribes from the number of people who are growing that are being added to the list. So you want a positive list growth rate. You don't want a negative one, right? If every month 10 people subscribe and 20 people unsubscribe, you have a negative growth rate, and then therefore you have a problem. Something is happening that is not good, and you need to learn how to correct that, right? So you want to have a positive list growth rate, and then just a couple of other really important ones that I think people tend to forget is that email sharing and forwarding is really powerful, and that's because there's social proof associated with it. If Doug sends me an email and I forward it along to Barry, that gives me a lot of credibility that I'm passing along on behalf of Doug to Barry, and so people are much more likely to open an email that a friend or a colleague or a peer has forwarded along to them. And so that email sharing or forward rate is actually really important to pay attention to. How many of your emails are actually being shared or forwarded from the email list or the email marketing campaigns that you're sending? Overall ROI, that is, how many dollars are actually being made based on the email list that you have? A lot of people don't track the dollars that connect to email, and why do all of this if you don't know what you're actually getting in terms of dollars and cents from the work that you're doing? And then, of course, open rate. I tend to think of open rate as being a confirmatory, like an affirmatory metric, in the sense that click-through rates are really what I care about. Open rates are good, but click-through rates are better. So if I see good click-through rates, then I'm going to look at the open rates, and that helps kind of confirm and affirm for me that things are going right. If the open rates are really good, but click-through rates are really bad, well, that is going to be a sign for me that there's something wrong with the email marketing campaigns that are going out, and we need to start thinking about how to correct that. Many times that's a technical issue. It's not necessarily a substantive issue. Sometimes it's a layout issue, just the nature of folks wanting to put lots and lots of photos in email, and and the reality is that email is meant to be communicating content and text. So really being focused on the text content and good layout is important. So those are some of the things to pay attention to. Doug, any thoughts, comments? And then we can move on to other analytics that need to be tracked.
Sure. I think the final thing to say with email marketing is that just to sort of just go back to where we began with, and that is you should use a reputable email marketing platform and understand what sort of reporting capabilities that it's got, because all those things that you mentioned there, Ray, they will all be part of a proper, well put together email marketing platform, and it completely de-risks your email marketing if you use one of those from the standpoint of being caught out with, the Spam Act and maximising your deliverability and those kinds of key things. So the next thing I think we'd like to talk about is, having done email marketing and we've got all our measures in place, is what about our regular online advertising programs that we might use, whether it's using Google AdWords or Bing, or maybe some other um, paid advertising campaigns. What are the sort of the key analytics in there that are your sort of go-to list?
Sure. Before we go there, I just wanted to pick out just 3 items that from your normal website. I think a lot of people forget that yes, you have website analytics, and we're going to talk about some of the tools for analyzing those analytics. But you want to really understand your website in a full view of what people are doing on it. But 2 analytics points, 2 metric points that I people tend not to pay attention to is speed. And speed is actually one of the number 1 factors for your website being indexed by Google and bringing people to it. So really think about the speed of your website, and then secondarily, your uptime. If you have a website that's going down repeatedly and you don't know that, then you're not able to really get into the search engine and be seen by people. Plus, it's a bad experience. If people constantly come to your site and it's not there, then you need to really understand that. So uptime metrics as well as speed metrics are really important to all of the other pieces and components of search engine analytics and so on and so forth. But so site analytics are important, and we can talk about some of those if folks have questions about that. But I won't get into too much of that now. Let's move on to ads, though. Ads have quite a number of metrics that are really important, and I don't want to get too bogged down in this because this could be 10 days worth of talking about ads analytics, but I'm just going to list them off because these are important. You should really think about impressions. This comes down to awareness campaigns and just being seen, and the brand, product, or service you're providing being seen. We talk about the idea of cost. We always have to manage costs in ad budget. So your ad spend, or the budget you decide to spend for any particular advertising campaign or as a company generally, we want to think about cost. We obviously want to think about clicks and what the budgeting mechanism for those clicks are going to be. The average CPC, of course, is included within that. We want to think about conversions. We want to think about impressions per campaign. So we might think about impressions overall in a particular ad account, but we really want to think about these further segmented by campaign, so that we can see, okay, this group of ads for this particular purpose produced us this many views across the advertising campaign that we ran. We want to talk about click-through rates, and then of course our click-through rates as a cost per conversion. And so how do we look at the cost per conversion and see how many ads that were put out there, how many people converted for that ad, and what was the cost per each person who converted. And that actually helps us to understand the acquisition cost for that person, and then we can start to extrapolate what that might look like in terms of running that ad long term. So we want to think about all of these pieces in advertising, really tying back to what our goals are for the marketing strategy, what the advertising strategy is as a whole for the business. So we're really looking at all of these various metrics as a mechanism for being able to understand better whether or not we want to use it in the future, whether it's being used as a strategic short-term fix, or whether it's going to be a long-term strategy. So we want to pay attention to some of these pieces as we experiment with them with the company, so that we're able to understand, okay, these pieces really work for a lead generation. These work really well for lead capture, and these really work for generalized marketing impressions, so that we're capable of building awareness about the brand on an ongoing basis. So those are just some of the analytics that we want to pay attention to, some of the metrics that we want to pay attention to, Doug.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of where people might place their ads, we mentioned at the beginning of this, there's AdWords, there's Google, and then there's obviously websites where you just might purchase some paid run-of-site advertising campaigns. Do you have a sense of which is most useful to companies, or what's your exposure and recommendations with respect to that?
In terms of where they should place ads?
Yeah, or actually, and also the platforms. It's like you can use something like Google, where potentially you don't really know where your ads are going to end up. You're really buying a certain number of exposures or click-throughs. And similarly with Bing, whereas with other advertising campaigns, it might be that you're looking for particular sites that will run advertising, and you're negotiating with that directly. So that might be a sort of an online media play where you purchase the advertising directly with that media player. So for small businesses, where do you think they're best addressing their advertising needs?
I have a little bit of a contrarian view about this, which is that I think that they should look at their niche, right? Look at your market really, really closely, and then just broaden its view to the larger market. Especially if you're a local business, you want to really think about the larger market around you and decide where your people are consuming. Where consumption happens is where you want ads to be displayed. And many times what happens is people just think, I'm just going to push ads on Facebook. And because people are consuming on Facebook, that's going to be where people are going to see my ad. Or I'm going to push ads onto Google, and that's where people are consuming, so that's where they're going to see it. But that actually lacks some strategic involvement. And so it might be that you might get the most out of a very strategic ad campaign in podcast audio ads that are interstitials for a local podcaster who has an audience that is directly associated with yours. You might decide that there's a local blogger or that there's an Instagram influencer that can actually provide you with exactly the audience you want in your jurisdiction, in your locality, to bring you the people that you want in terms of foot or retail traffic. We need to think about this in a little bit more of a mindful way so that we're able to get the right ad results that we want. Many times ads, it's not because ads don't work. People put money into ads and then they don't work and they say, oh, ads don't work. It's not the ads, it's not the platforms. It's all about the strategy. You got to put the dollars and cents into the right place with the right common sense. And common sense is unfortunately uncommon, and it's not anyone's fault. You just have to know and or experiment to get to that point. And so you need to really think about where is your audience consuming and where are they most likely to be influenced. So consumption is one side of it, but where are they most likely to be influenced by the ad when it's placed in front of them, and or they hear it or they see it in video? You need to think about that more importantly than thinking about just pushing it on a particular platform. Video ads might be good for your business, but video ads placed erratically are not going to be good for you. Placed specifically even on a platform according to some industry may not be good enough for you. You're going to have to think about who are the people, who are the players in your market who you really want to put those ads in front of so that they can put them in front of their audience and tell them, this I give proof to, right? Just like with the email forwarding and sharing component. If I take that email from Doug and send it to Barry, I'm lending to Doug credence so that Barry will open up that email. The same thing applies with ads. You can't have ads just pushed in front of people, especially as a local or a small business, and expect other people to see it without some social proofing involved. And so that requires this omni-channel approach where you create marketing awareness, you create a lead capture system and lead generation and capture system that people can understand and give people value, and then advertising grows on top of that so that influencers have a way to drive people to something that they're going to be interested in receiving. So we have to really think about this from a holistic approach, and once we do, then the wheels start churning and dollars and cents start flowing into the business, and then you can use those dollars to reinvest in the business and hopefully pay the bills, right? So we have to think about it from that perspective. So I hope that helps Doug a little bit kind of to understand where we are in terms of thinking through the strategy, in terms of choosing where we place ads, and really in the background, the infrastructure, the lattice work that tells us which ads are going to go up and which ads are not going to go up and in front of whom. We might have a completely different ad strategy for one influencer and another ad strategy for a platform like Twitter. We might decide we're going to generalize market on Twitter with awareness campaigns because we want to be able to drive awareness in that capacity because we have an influencer who is active there but doesn't have influence there. They're influencing on Instagram, and it's kind of like remarketing. We're providing some level of awareness on one side so that when someone goes over to Instagram and starts to engage, they've already had those touch points with that person, and they feel like they already know that business, and so therefore they're going to be more likely to do what that business wants them to do at the end of the day.
Okay. So thinking about that, and for the small business owners that often, I think, are very enamored with the idea of actually um, seeing a direct sale come about from any activity that they engage in. Should they be more concerned about to what extent should they be concerned about ad impressions, or should they really just focus on conversions and the number of leads generated or the number of widgets sold?
Yeah, so ad impressions without context is useless. So we need to look at all of these metrics really in concert. We need to think about this from a more holistic approach. And again, without a strategy, without us knowing why we're looking for these metrics and what we're doing with them, we don't really have a game plan. And without a game plan, it's as good as throwing money into the wind. So I'd much rather people know what they were looking for, and then deciding based on that what we're going to do, because we know what an awareness campaign and we know what impressions do for marketing psychology, for consumer psychology. But we don't know whether people are going to love your product, service, or brand, and so we need to be able to experiment in that capacity many times. If people don't understand that, then they're just going to, be frustrated. They're not going to understand that it's not that the ads don't work, it's that we're trying to collect data, right? So at that point, that's data collection, that's experimentation. Then we can take that beyond that to say, okay, well, we know these ads work. These really make people love or hate your brand, right? And there can be reasons for either of those things. I know that I want sometimes people to hate my brand so that they don't come to me. And that's totally fine, right? I don't want people to always love my brand. I want people to know what my brand is, and if I can persuade people for or against it, then that's going to really help me. Politicians do this every day, so I don't think we're anywhere different from politicians in that sense. Politicians work to create a pro or negative, positive or negative view of them based on what they want people to do. It's manipulative. It's beyond persuasion. I think it's just manipulative. But we have to think about this from the perspective that as a business, we're trying to make money, and within law and reason, we need to do the things that make sense for the business to be able to bring people to our doors. And so, not asking anyone to corrupt their morals. What I'm asking them to do is think thoughtfully about their marketing strategy and understanding how people work. People work in particular ways, especially in a digital experience. And if we can use those levers to bring people closer to your brand and ultimately to buy, then all the better. Especially if you're doing a good service, right? If you're doing something that satisfies a felt need or want, why not do the work to make sure that it works really well? But many times it does require kicking the tires around and really thinking through the strategy a little bit more than people tend to do.
Ray, can I just back us up just a little bit to a comment that you made earlier? PTV Channel O obviously has advertising and sponsorship slots on our station, and one of the things that we find with some of our advertisers is that there is a misconception out there that advertising is just about selling. Now that's not actually true, because we have an advertiser on this station that very seldom sells things, but the important thing for them is their exposure. And if you sell, for example, if you sell toilet paper, people are likely to say, oh, well, I need toilet paper every day, so this is a good thing, I'll go and buy this. However, if you sell motor vehicles, people don't go out and buy motor vehicles every day. So the important thing for some advertisers is not that you're selling, but that you're in front of people. Because what we need is so that if I'm advertising motor vehicles, when somebody decides they want to buy a motor vehicle, that they go back and they say, oh yes, I've seen that ad on PTV Channel or wherever, So when they think about your product, that's they're thinking about you. When they think about that type of product, you're the person that they think about to go to.
Right. It's market mindshare, as we call it, right? So we want people to think of you when they think of a particular market. And that, again, it's awareness, and that's an ongoing awareness campaign for certainly car dealerships, because people aren't buying cars every day, as you said. And so that needs to be an ongoing awareness campaign that encourages people to recognize the car dealership or the brand of vehicle, that when they think, you know what, it's time for that junker outside to go to the trash heap, I better go buy a new vehicle. They're going to go to the dealership or to the manufacturer, that they desire, and they're going to choose that dealership that they've been seeing ads over and over again. As I said, it's manipulative, it's persuasive, whatever you want to call it, but there is a mind share that gets taken up, a space that literally gets taken up in people's brains that fills when they hear a message over and over and over again, and that's the whole point. So, I don't think it's about, I tell you, come buy from me today, and you come buy from me today. It's about a strategy in mind that's going to really work for the long term. And I think a lot of businesses think that advertising is a short-term return process. And I think to some great extent, online ads have contributed to that misnomer, because there are event-driven and other kinds of advertising campaigns that are very, immediate and direct return. But for the most part, for the vast majority of us who are in service-based or product-based businesses, it's actually a longer process to getting to a sale than placing an ad and getting a purchase immediately.
Yeah, and Doug, you probably find it too that while people are, if we have an Oz hosting ad running here, I doubt that people in the short term are going to say, "Oh, I'm going to change my hosting to Oz hosting immediately because I saw the ad." But the more they see the ad, and if you're using paid advertising, an immediate result for something like your service is probably not going to happen. It's probably going to be something that if I don't have a website, why would I go and take out hosting with Oz hosting? But as people see this show and as they hear about Oz hosting over time, they're likely to say, "Well, maybe we will get better from Oz hosting. Let's go and check them out."
Yeah, absolutely, Barry, and it never ceases to amaze us, where our customers come from, and sometimes they've been on the chat line 18 months ago, and back of mind they've come back to us, 18 months later, and A, expect people to remember their name and that they've engaged with the company, and B, feel as though they have some sort of a relationship. And it's interesting the way these things just build over time. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you've got to keep the brand out there, and people will salt things away. And if they've ever felt that they've received some value and some generally some good advice, I think is one of the key things in our business. If we help people make some smart decisions about choosing technology, they soon figure out that we're not really trying to maximize their spend. We're trying to find the best possible solution for them, and when that becomes obvious, then things tend to work out really well. Now, just on that particular subject, and we were just talking about advertising, one of the things about our website is that there's also some metrics we can probably consider, Ray, to make sure that if somebody does click through to the website, that the experience is going to be a good one for them. So what are the sort of things that you look for in terms of the performance parameters of the website, whether it's the design or the hosting environment for that matter?
Yeah, so I very infrequently think about design. I'm really a function type person, and I believe in function because functional design will always be stronger than just pretty. And so we think about it from the perspective of how long do people spend time on a particular page. So just like with email, we think about bounce rates. On a page, we think about bounce rate, but bounce rate just means that how many people entered a single page and then left it. Bounce rate could actually be a little bit misguided, though, because or misleading, because when you think about a bounce rate, if you have content on a particular page that is very valuable, but that's why the person came and then they leave it, you will have a high bounce rate on that particular page or across the whole site. Could potentially, exacerbate the bounce rate just because you're providing exactly what that person wants, and then they leave the site from there. So there's a little bit of retail understanding that we have to have about our site. We have to make valuable content, but we also have to figure out whether time on site, and meaning how long someone lingers, as well as the funnel. That is, what is the natural behavior of the site as people come along? When we're thinking about website, analytics generally, we think about acquisition. We think about the audience. What are the demographics? What's the makeup of the people who are visiting our site? We think about the behavior on the site, and then ultimately we think about conversion. What did people do when we asked them to do it? So those are the four fundamentals of analytics that we really think about and are concerned about on websites. And then we kind of reverse that. We think about, as we talked about, email and ads, and while we haven't talked about social yet, it's one of those components where we think about how all of those pieces feed into the website and ultimately lead to sales. In the social category, and then we'll take a break, is we want to really think about social from a little bit more of a business perspective than not. Many times people realize ads and awareness, but social also provides us a level of awareness. So we want to think about what's our impressions, what's our potential reach for the social campaigns that we're running. And what I really care about when it comes to reach or potential reach is actually for ads, because when we have a potential reach, then when we do really well organically with a particular post or with some particular content that we've put out there, then we can look at that from a potential reach perspective, and we can say, listen, if we have a potential reach on this particular video that just went out, let's boost that one with an ad, and on whatever platform it might be, and let's really get reach for that. And it's going to be advertised, but because it performed well organically, we know that it's going to perform well with some dollars behind it. We also want to know audience growth rate. So just like with our email growth rate, how many people are unfollowing or stopping subscribing your social media? That could be your blog, podcast, your video channel on YouTube. It could be your Facebook page or Instagram profile or Twitter profile or otherwise. How many people are actually subscribing? How many people are unsubscribing? And do you have a positive growth rate for your audience? We also want to understand sentiment analysis. And this is one of those things, like I said, we want to know whether people love or hate the business. We also want to know whether people love or hate the content. And remember that people can hate content, not hate, but people can negatively respond to content, not because they dislike you or it. If I talked about, hurting children, you would have a lot of people dislike that content, right? But appropriately so, I hope. I hope they dislike the content for hurting children, right? And so you need to understand what you're posting and then the sentiment associated with that so you can make good decisions. Does your audience, if you have a nonprofit organization that's funding stopping child trafficking, and you're posting a lot of content about children being harmed by whatever the external forces are, you're going to get a lot of negative sentiment on your posts. Rightly so. People are going to respond, viscerally to seeing children suffering. So you should be prepared to understand that sentiment and know that that's what you're trying to go after. And then you can post opposite content, right? Content about you empowering children, empowering programs and systems to be able to bring those children out of suffering. And when you do that, you're going to see positive sentiment based on that. The worst sentiment is no sentiment, is apathy. You don't want apathy. Really, it's so important to start looking at sentiment analysis from you want to be tugging at heartstrings one way or the other. People need to emote positively or negatively, but for them to just not emote, that's what are you doing? Why are you doing this if not to get people to feel something? So you need to really think about that. And then just last two little items there is, of course, we want to think about how website traffic, how leads are coming to our website, and more importantly than that is the engagement rate to the site. So if we engage with people on social media, they're much more likely to engage with our content on our website more. That means they'll become return visitors and they'll interact and engage with our site more. So we really want to consider how our website traffic leads lead to return visits on the site. We want to track that traffic forward so that someone follows me on Twitter, they like what I'm doing, they come to my website, and they get a little bit of the content. Maybe they comment on something, maybe they fill out a contact form, and then after that, what have they done to return back to that site to reintegrate with other content and engage with that content? We want to really see that flow to see whether or not that person's actually really truly interested in a product or service that we have to offer, and then approach them about that information that can bring them over the finish line to the sale. And so we really want to pay attention to that. And many times what we do is we lead people to our website and we just forget about the reality there. And that leads me to my final and kind of metric, which is assisted social conversions, which is that we want to pay attention to which social touch points led to a conversion on the website and being able to tie those pieces to each other. I want to know the return on investment of my time on social. If I'm spending time on social and I'm not getting a return from my time on social, I'm wasting my time, and so are you. So we need to tie those two pieces together, even if they are really broad numbers. I always say I do an intro to blogging workshop, and in my full day workshop, I always tell folks, start out with thinking, how many dollars did I make this month? And how many blog posts did I write? And just track those two numbers. How many blog posts did you write and what dollars did you make? And if the number increases over 6 months, you're doing the right things. As crazy as it sounds, the statistics actually work out. If you do the work and you start doing well, then you can correlate those two in some way, shape, or form. They're not causal, but they're correlated. And it usually is because of somewhere in the mix of what you're doing better marketing-wise. And so if they follow the methodology that I talk about in my blogging workshop, people tend to be successful, but they're tracking just two very basic metrics. They're tracking what their gross revenues are, and they're tracking how many blog posts they're doing. And when they do more blogging, they tend to see more revenues. Why? Maybe that's because they have more to talk about when they go to a networking event and they're talking to folks about content, and they say, hey, you know what? I wrote this blog post last week, and people are like, oh wow, that person's really up on their stuff in their industry. Maybe it's because they're getting more traffic from good SEO on the blog posts that they're writing. Who knows? You can get more sophisticated over time, but the reality is that you have to start tracking somewhere, and you might as well start figuring out what is your assisted social conversions, and really, like, what's your ROI generally if you can figure that out. So, I say all that to say that there's very complicated analytics that we can talk about, but there's also just some basic fundamentals that we can think about and then get more sophisticated over time. And so with that, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about tools you can use for collecting some of this data.
If you've lost your income or had a change of earning capacity through no fault of your own and are struggling with debt that you can no longer handle, you probably feel a bit like this ant. If the struggle is getting you down and you feel overwhelmed, there is an answer. Central Liaison has helped thousands of people break free of the debt struggle by handling their debt for them. Freeze all interest, stop the harassing calls from the bank, and start enjoying life again. Call them today on 0409 344 070 for a confidential, obligation-free chat about how Central Liaison can help you take your life back. The number again, 0409 344 070. Call them now.
Power FM is total entertainment. From the morning drive with Fiona and Jeff to the drive home with Jeff Black. On the weekends, catch the Crazy Kevin Show. Dennis Mitchell's Breakfast with the Beatles, the Semi-Pro Sports Show, and Racing Nation with James O'Shea, plus the music you grew up with. Keep your radio dial locked on Toowoomba's Power FM, celebrating 10 years. You'll find us at 88.0 on the FM dial or online at www.powerfmradio.com.au.
Oz Hosting is proud to support Switched On IT in bringing practical help to Australian businesses. We're talking to literally hundreds of businesses every day about their IT services, how to make them more efficient, how to make their businesses more efficient, and how to protect their valuable data. If you'd like your IT services securely hosted right here in Australia and expertly managed, talk to Oz Hosting.
When the going gets tough, advertising is a must. Thousands of potential customers make buying decisions every day based on advertising they've seen or heard on radio and television. Are you losing sales because potential customers don't know what you offer? Get your business, product or service in front of thousands of potential customers with a joint advertising package on Power FM and PTV Channel O. Capture a multimedia audience with our affordable radio, TV media advertising package. Stay ahead of the pack by contacting Barry on 0431 390 920 or email feedback@ptvchannelo.com or Jeff at powerfmtoowoomba@gmail.com.
Mind, Body, Soul with Perth-based international speaker and influencer Gwenda Smith. Every week we explore the world of business and personal development with an exciting new format with some of the world's leading experts on productivity, mindfulness, sales success, personal development and more every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Only on ptvchannelo.com or the PTV Channel O app. PTV Channel O. Discover a whole new world of entertainment.
Welcome back, everybody. From before the break, we were talking about all the various analytics that we can collect, and now what we want to do is talk about some of the tools you can use to start to track that data, to start collecting it and getting it into your coffers, into your digital coffers. And so, Doug, let's start off with websites. What are some of the tools that we can all use in order to start getting data from our websites?
Right. Well, I think if we start very, very broad, it's a matter of making sure that the website is actually is live and has maximum uptime. So there are various tools that will measure uptime. We offer one which is called Drop My Site, which is actually a website backup service, but that will also do blacklist monitoring of the domain name of the website. So if you've done something wrong with your email and it's affecting your domain's reputation, it will alert you to that, because that will affect your search visibility if the domain reputation is in any way impaired. But also it can measure the uptime, and it will actually ping the website from different parts of the world. And as long as it can connect and know that the site is live, it can then generate reports over time. Well, typically generate an exception report. So if it pings it from North America or from Europe or something like that and finds that the site times out, it will send an email, or you can set it so that it will send an email if it times out continually over a 60-second period or something like that. So maximizing website uptime is important for a lot of reasons. There's also, keeping it reasonably broad as well. There's the concept of the page load speed of the website. So this is all about ensuring that the visitor experience is an enjoyable one. So we do see a lot of websites that are designed with very big images that then rotate through on a slideshow. Things like that can really have a devastating impact on speed, and it's not so much the hosting environment, it's the poor fellow who's the visitor who's sitting at home on just a normal internet connection with a normal browser, and they're asking their browser to essentially upload and if you like ingest this huge amount of content before it will actually show anything on screen. And as we all know, there's a real correlation between how long a website takes to render in your browser and the likelihood that you're going to continue to browse on that website. So, that's sort of the two of the metrics that we can have a look at broadly. Are there any, in terms of those sort of broad metrics, are there other tools that you know of that you would use to actually measure those metrics?
Yeah, certainly. The tool we use most is GT Metrics. It's a fantastic tool that gives us a lot of back-end data. What you're talking about, Doug, like first time to paint and first contentful paint, all of those very kind of intricate SEO type things that we want to know what's happening on the server. GT Metrics is really my kind of go-to tool for looking at all that stuff. Google's Page Speed Insights tool is also really helpful. Google Search Console is also very helpful for being able to just diagnose ongoing problems with any particular either setup or server problems. And we want to make sure that we're paying attention to the notifications coming out of Google Search Console. So we want to do that. Of course, we also want to make sure that we are using some form of site analytics tool. You can use Google Analytics. Google Analytics is actually part of what's called the Google Marketing Platform. So it's your marketing and advertising platform that Google provides. And so I'm the Google Small Business Advisor for productivity, and so I spend a lot of time talking about Google, but there's a reason for that. Google provides all of these tools for free, and so you should take advantage of them. Google Analytics is one of them. They're not the only one. For example, if you have a WordPress website, you can use a tool called Jetpack that does site analytics, and so it can track that data and give it back to you. You can use KISS metrics and Crazy Jar or Hotjar to be able to do heat mapping of your site, which basically shows a color-based mapping on top of your site to see where people mostly click on things and where they browse throughout the site. So you can use some pretty sophisticated tools, some basic tools as well. But in the Google space, in the marketing platform, just so you know, Google has analytics that is free for you. They also have Optimize, which allows for experimentation of, say, A/B testing, where you can change various things on a site and display different versions of your site to your audience as they're visiting to determine which is more effective. You can do and use Google Surveys. It's actually one of the only products in that space that Google charges you for, but in essence, you can get real opinions from customers about any topics that you want. So basically, you can survey real people and get their opinions pretty fast and reliably. So the Google Marketing Platform gives you all of these pieces together, but the kind of coup d'etat, the really important piece, is Google Data Studio. So what Google Data Studio does is it brings together all of these disparate data, and you can, in essence, throw them all into Google Data Studio and chart them, visualize them in some way, shape, or form so that you can better understand the data. It is absolutely amazing of a tool, and it's probably the number one thing that I tell people they should learn. If you have an email marketing software that's churning out tables and tables of data, if you have social metrics tools that you're pulling all this data out of, say you're using Hootsuite or Hootsuite's Adespresso platform for social ad analytics, if you're using Sprout Social or Buffer or otherwise, you can export their data. Even Eventbrite, export Eventbrite's statistical data, and then you can import that into Google Data Studio, all for free, and inside of Google Data Studio, now it can start looking at that data and mashing it together to give you real-time responses. So you can ask it questions. You can say, how many people visited my website last month? And it can look at your Google Analytics data and identify unique views versus just normal browsing views. And you can say, how many people came to my website and bought something from an email that I sent? And by looking at its data from your email marketing software plus from your website, it's able to connect those two pieces of the pie and give you thoughtful responses to that question. So very, very powerful platform, but you have to learn how to use it. You have to learn how to get good data into it, and that's really important for you to be able to figure out. But there's so many different tools out there that I think are really powerful. Many times the email marketing platform that you're using has really strong native analytics, so you want to use those. If for some reason you're using a platform and they're not giving you good data, I would change email marketing software. I would go to a different email marketing platform that's going to be able to give you the data you want to see. But then again, as I said, as long as you as long as they are collecting that data and you're able to export it, Google Data Studio, it should be your best friend, because it can take that data and put it into a way that will make it make sense to you visually. And so many times, all we need to do is have the right data displayed in front of us for us to be able to make that those good decisions. And that takes me to my final thought, and then I'm going to put it over to you, Doug, which is to say that when it comes to data, you have to have enough data to make good choices. There is a certain threshold before any data makes sense. So if you've got 10 people coming to your website every month, you just don't have enough data to make good sense of what's going on. But if you have consistently 100 people coming to your website and they're doing real things on that site, they're not robots, they're not spiders or other kinds of rubbish hits, then you might have enough data to start making some good business decisions. So I can't give some generalized number like 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people coming to your site and all of a sudden it is what they call statistically significant data set. But at some point you will know this is real data coming from real marketing activities, and so our advertising, our promotion strategies are working and people are coming to our website from it. Now is the time to start looking at that data and understanding why they're doing it and what they're doing with it, and then optimizing so that it can get better. Your website is not a static creature. It's something that should be like an ever-flowing river. It's constantly changing and constantly adapting to its environment. And you need to as well as a business owner. So think about it from that perspective, and I think you are going to be on a much better road to understanding the data, getting the data out of the systems that you currently have it in, putting it together into something like Google Data Studio so you can better understand it, and then say, okay, where is the threshold for being able to decide that this data is now providing us with enough data so that we can start making some substantive business decisions. Doug, I'm going to pass it over to you for final thoughts.
Right. Look, my final thoughts are that we've covered some really key bases there in the online journey for a small business, in Australia or really anywhere in the world. And I think just to sort of summarise it, there's loads of email marketing platforms out there. Most of them are very good. They're quite simple to use, and they will generate the metrics and the reports that you will really need to be able to manage that communication platform effectively. We've also covered online advertising and the different types of online advertising and the metrics there. The click-through rates and the cost per conversion and the things that a business needs to consider in that. We've also covered off, the website itself. Is it fast? Is it slow? What are the tools that we can use to simply and easily assess that? We've talked about social media and the importance of that, and it's a key element, I think, in the brand building process to have an appropriate social media profile. And then we've discussed some of the tools that people will use to be able to measure the effectiveness of their online activities, such as Google AdWords and the Hootsuite are two of the very common ones, and GT Metrics, of course, for analysing your website's performance, its page load speed, and those sorts of things. So I think what we've covered is a really terrific toolkit, and hopefully a lot of small businesses are going to come back and use that, because I'm sure they'll find it incredibly valuable. A lot of these tools that we've spoken about today at Oz Hosting, we absolutely use those tools. Tools like GT Metrics, for example, we swear by them as well. So I don't have anything further to add to that summary. So I'd hand it back to you, Barry.
Thanks, Doug. Doug, can I just come back to a point that you made right at the beginning when you were talking about somebody that was asking about using regular Office 365 email. One of the things that I get really cross about with people using an email service like that is that if you send out an email on a regular email service to several hundred people and you don't send it out as a BCC, you have just sent my email address to everybody on your list. And I didn't give you permission to do that. So that's one of the big drawbacks of using a service like that as well, is the privacy issue, quite apart from the spam issue and some of the other things. Now, thank you, Doug and Ray, for your input today. Yeah, that's been a very valuable session, and I think that if people are not tracking their analytics, they're probably doing themselves a disservice, and we will be hoping that this will prompt some people to start doing some things perhaps that they haven't been doing before. But we will leave it there. Thank you for your time again, and we'll see you again next week.
Terrific. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Barry.
You've been watching Switched on IT. We've been talking today about data. If there's anything in this session that has prompted questions or things that you would like to know, maybe you want to know more about some of the platforms that you can use, some of the data analytics that you can use. There's been a lot of information, so you might have been confused by some of it. If there's anything that you'd like to know, be sure to send us an email. The address is feedback@ptvchannelo.com. Or get onto our website and send us a message on our contact page. Don't forget that all of the sessions that you have seen, including today's session, are on video on demand, so you can go back and you can have a look at any of our past sessions as well. Be sure to connect with us on our social media. Here's a list of everywhere that you can connect with us on. And also, don't forget that this session and all of our sessions, and indeed all of our shows, are now also part of podcasts for PTV Channel O. So you can go and if you look for the PTV Channel O podcasts, it's in several places, including Spotify. So you can go and you can pick up, maybe you want to listen to this session again on a podcast while you're driving or something like that. You can always pick that up and you can listen to the sound from any of our shows. We look forward to seeing you again next week when Doug and Ray will be with us to talk to you about another IT subject. Until then, take care and stay COVID safe.
When the going gets tough, advertising is a must. Thousands of potential customers make buying decisions every day based on advertising they've seen or heard on radio and television. Are you losing sales because potential customers don't know what you offer? Get your business, product or service in front of thousands of potential customers with a joint advertising package on Power FM and PTV Channel O. Capture a multimedia audience with our affordable radio, TV media advertising package. Stay ahead of the pack by contacting Barry on 0431 390 920 or email feedback@ptvchannelo.com or Jeff@powerfmtoowoomba@gmail.com.